Tanakwe, Talofa, and good morning to you people of the internet. Welcome to the show. Well, it's time to venture back into the world of Doctor Who. After my last foray, which, looking back, was I decided to go back, and today we're going to travel back in time ourselves, right back to 1975.
Ah, what a year for Britain that was. A woman became leader of the Conservative Party, the country was arguing about whether it should be part of the European Union, there were terrorist attacks going on, and this is oddly familiar. But 1975 was also quite an important year for Doctor Who. This was the year when the most iconic classic Doctors stepped aboard the TARDIS, that being Tom Baker. Season 12 would leave quite a mark on the show, in some ways for the better, others not so much, depending on your viewpoint. But from this season came one of the show's most prominent stories, Genesis of the Daleks.
This was my first introduction to Classic Who, and it remains today my favourite Classic Who story. But what makes it so great? Well, journey with me and let's find out.
We open up on a battlefield on an alien world. Either that or a scene from a discount Saving Private Ryan. After a slight skirmish, we see the Doctor materialise on the planet before encountering a Time Lord with a mission for him.
Daleks. Daleks. Tell me more.
The Time Lords inform him that a time is foreseen when the Daleks have completely dominated the universe, and they want the Doctor to prevent this from happening, either by stopping their creation or influencing their evolution into something less aggressive. It's a really interesting premise here, the Time Lords being so willing to break a key law and potentially wipe out an entire race. Even more so when New Who writer Russell T Davies cites this episode as the beginning of the Time War. Having been gifted a time ring and reuniting with his companions, the Doctor encounters a dead body, and with investigation, hypothesizes a millennium of war. It's actually a really well done idea in this first half of the story, and I'll get into the nitty-gritty of that as it comes to show. But, quick tangent, what do I think of these characters? Tom Baker is absolutely fantastic. He has Hartnell's twinkle, along with his own twisted brand of comedy, darkness, and seriousness, and it definitely shows in the story. The first four Doctors all had brilliant, larger-than-life personalities that made them iconic, but Tom's was the biggest of them all. No bones about it. Tom Baker is my favourite Doctor, both in the classic show and overall. From my favourite Doctor, we go to my favourite companion. Sarah Jane Smith is simply wonderful. She's competent, bold, brave, daring, and that really makes her memorable for me. And yes, I've seen the Sarah Jane Adventures. I'll have a video about that later if it's not up already. Other Classic Who companions I like include Jamie, Perry, Turlough, and Ace. As for Harry Sullivan, meh. I don't dislike him by any means, he's okay. Anyway, end of tangent, on we go. The trio comes across a minefield. Good tactic, by the way, bottlenecking the advance through an already tight corridor, when the Doctor freezes and has a very tense look on his face.
Harry, I'm standing on a landmine. I felt it shift. If I move my foot, it might detonate it.
I think this is a really cool scene, and a good example of the minimalism of the classic show. You don't need a lot to create tension. It doesn't have to attack the audience. Here, it's just this quiet, creeping feeling that one bad move will kill the Doctor. The music is quiet and creeping, the voices are nice and quiet. It just works so well here, whereas a massive orchestra and shouting would have just ruined the scene completely. As they explore more of the war-torn Skaro, they are caught in the middle of another skirmish. The Doctor and Harry are taken in by one side, while Sarah Jane, mistaken among the dead, is left behind. Harry and the Doctor are recognised as not being Thals and are sent to General Raven. Wait a minute, that's Guy Sinner, who some of you might recognise from another show. Yes, Lieutenant Gruber from Allo Allo. He does well in both shows, but I recommend you watch this before Allo Allo if you haven't watched it already. Otherwise, you won't be able to take him seriously here. Raven is a Kala general who appears to have a massive superiority complex, and whose people have taken quite an inspiration from the Third Reich, as displayed.
When victory is ours, we'll wipe every trace of the Thals and their city from the face of this land.
The Doctor manages to tend to Raven and convinces him to get out of the bunker. As they almost make it out, we encounter Nyder, the security commander. Oh, I love Nyder. He is so effortlessly malicious and sinister. He has the demeanour of a Bond villain. And I'd say, had Harry Potter been created earlier, he'd be perfect as Snape. The trio make it out of a skirmish, but are recaptured and are planned to be interrogated. While all this is going on, Sarah Jane has escaped and is continuing to explore the wastelands, before coming across an all too familiar foe.
Halt. Turn right. Halt. Now. Exterminate. The weaponry is perfect. Now we can begin.
As Davros, the Dalek, and Garmin the officer leave the testing ground, Sarah Jane goes to investigate before getting surrounded by mutos, the creatures that mutated from the chemical weapons used in the first century of the war. I'll get to them in a moment. Nyder arrives with the Doctor and Harry, and once he leaves...
Good, well now he's got any chance of a cup of tea? What? Or coffee. My friend and I have had a very trying experience. Haven't we had a trying experience, Harry?
Very trying, Doctor.
Tom, you freaking badass. A hero may laugh in the face of danger, but the Doctor stands in evil's face and asks it for tea. As the prisoners are scanned, the Doctor has his time ring confiscated before being taken off to Ronson, a senior researcher. Back to the mutos. I personally really like the design of them. Sure, you have Severin with his hood down and the deformities are masked really well, but with the surrounding ones, you don't see an inch of what's beneath them. Another instance of minimalism, and kind of emphasises the idea that the mutations are all different for every single one. After Severin saves Sarah Jane, a Thal patrol finds them, shooting Sarah's attempted killer and capturing the other mutos along with Smith herself. And it once again changes the perception of the Thals. We do see them work with the Doctor in earlier stories, but I like seeing them in this darker light. It's kind of like how Rogue One made the Rebel Alliance be willing to turn on agents in order to preserve their cause. We still kind of root for them, though what they do lets us see that even the heroes are human, that even they have a dark side to their organisation. Back in the bunker, Ronson's interrogation takes an interesting turn upon discovering the Doctor's biological makeup is alien, before Davros arrives. I didn't get a chance to talk about him earlier, but I think Davros is a really solid villain on the show. Some argue that his presence devolved the Daleks into foot soldiers, and I see where they're coming from. But I think Davros really plays well against the Doctor. The conflict is really interesting, and definitely this is true in this story. As for the actor, Michael Wisher is a brilliant Davros. This was sadly his only appearance in the role, succeeded by 3 actors, including the fantastic Terry Malloy. Anyway, Davros is showing off his Mark III travel machine and his alterations. But when Ronson intervenes, Davros isn't happy.
You think the saving of a worthless life more important than the progress we have made? My creature showed a natural desire, an instinct to destroy, and you interceded. You will be punished for this.
It's quite clear there's links with Adolf Hitler here, and actually a large part of Davros' character is also inspired by British philosopher Bertrand Russell. A bit odd, but also quite interesting. In the Thal City, with guards that look like thum-thums and hazmat suits, Sarah Jane, Severin and a Khaled are in a prison, being used to prepare a war rocket to be launched at the Khaled city. However, the explosives threaten them with toxemia, which will eventually kill them. While back in the bunker, the Doctor and Harry are in their own cell and are visited by Ronson, who speaks to them about the Daleks and Davros' experiments. There is dissent, but little courage to speak out against him. So the Doctor and Harry break out to try and inform the Kala government of the experiments. And now we come back to Sarah Jane, who is plotting with the prisoners to escape through the rocket silo. This is what I love about her. She can hold her own, act independently. She's daring. I don't think the likes of Rose and Martha, well, Series 3 Martha, would be willing to do that. The escape starts well, but the Thals catch wind and go after them, killing several of the escapees in the process. While Sarah Jane and Severin make it to the cone, they're stopped and recaptured. Oh well, at least she was bold enough to try. As the Doctor and Harry navigate the hidden caves, Harry ends up the victim of a surprise attack. A giant clam. Really? Last time I looked, this was Doctor Who, not the 60s Batman show. Yeah, some of these things did not age well, to say the least. We see more dissent among the scientists and a meeting with the Doctor and council members about the Daleks, who agree to investigate and suspend the experiments. And Raven informs them of Sarah, offering a hand to get into the city. It is a bit unusual to see him acting so nice, especially as Harry had a pistol to his back not long ago. All the while, we see Davros is willing to betray his own people to further his own experiments, as the Doctor and Harry discover in the Thal Dome.
I have tried, time and again I have tried, but now they will be satisfied with nothing other than total annihilation of the Thal people.
Whoa, that is evil. And even when Nyder is trying to act like a good guy, he still seems so malevolent. The Doctor and Harry find Sarah and the Mutos, who are intended to be killed by the rocket launch, but manage to free them. As the Doctor tries to sabotage the rocket, he's caught in a trap. And here we end the first part of the review. So far, I do really like the build-up. You have strong performances from heroes and villains alike, well done minimalist effects, and despite some aspects not aging so well, it still is really enjoyable.
And like other great stories of classic Who, this one keeps sucking you into the story and the atmosphere that it builds, and that is another great marker to the story.
Well, how does the story end? Is Davros's treachery realised? Will the Doctor succeed in his mission? Well, join me next time for the next part of the review. But until next time guys, goodbye, haerera.